You are not dumb, you are not bad at communicating, you are not emotionally immature. But there is something happening in your most important conversations that is costing you relationships, respect, and peace of mind, and nobody has ever explained it to you in a way that actually makes sense. That changes right now. Here is what nobody tells you about intelligent people and emotional conversations. The smarter you are, the worse you tend to perform when emotions get high. And I know that sounds backwards. It sounds like it should be the opposite. But stay with me, because once you understand what is actually happening inside your brain during these moments, you will never look at a heated conversation the same way again. Let me paint you a picture. You are in a conversation with someone you care about. Maybe it is your partner, your best friend, someone you work with closely. The conversation starts normal enough. And then something shifts. A word is used, a tone changes, something is said that lands wrong. And suddenly you feel it. That rising heat in your chest, that tightening in your throat, that speed in your thoughts where your brain is firing 100 responses per second. You know exactly what you want to say. You have evidence, you have logic, you have a clear point. So you say it. And somehow the conversation gets worse. They get more upset, you get more frustrated. And you walk away feeling completely misunderstood, even though everything you said was completely rational and completely correct. Sound familiar? Because it happens to some of the most brilliant, thoughtful, emotionally aware people every single day. And it is not a character flaw. It is actually a neurological trap that intelligence accidentally builds. Now before we go deeper, if you have been struggling with this pattern for a long time and you are ready to actually transform the way you communicate under pressure, there is a program linked in the video description below. Most people will scroll past it and keep doing what they have always done. Most people will watch this video, feel inspired for 20 minutes, and then go back to the same cycles. If that sounds like you, do not bother clicking. But if you are someone who actually wants to change, not just understand but genuinely change, take a look before this video is over. Now back to what is really happening. When a conversation becomes emotionally charged, your brain does something called an amygdala hijack. The amygdala is the part of your brain that handles threat detection. It evolved to keep you alive in dangerous situations. And here is the critical thing. It cannot tell the difference between a physical threat and an emotional one. When your partner raises their voice, when someone questions your character, when you feel attacked or dismissed or misunderstood, that same primal alarm goes off. Your body prepares for survival. Your heart rate increases. Cortisol floods your system. And blood flow is literally redirected away from your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for logic, empathy, and measured communication. So in the exact moment you need your intelligence the most, your brain is physically cutting off access to it. But here is where it gets really interesting and really painful for smart people specifically. Intelligent people have built up a strong relationship with their cognitive abilities. They have spent years being right, being sharp, being the one who figures things out. So when the emotional heat rises, instead of slowing down, they speed up. They reach harder for logic. They pull out more evidence. They try to construct a more airtight argument. Because their whole identity is wrapped around being clear and correct. And the other person is not experiencing logic right now. The other person is experiencing emotion. And what they need in that moment is not to be debated. What they need is to feel heard. This is the gap. This is the specific gap that destroys relationships, derails conversations, and leaves brilliant people lying awake at night replaying what they said and wondering why it did not work. Think about how many times this has happened to you. Think about the arguments that went nowhere, the conversations that started about one thing and exploded into something completely different. Think about the relationships where you feel like no matter how clearly you explain yourself, somehow it always comes back around to the same fight. Think about the silent drives home, the texts you stared at and did not know how to respond to. The times you said exactly what you meant and it came out completely wrong. That cost is not small. Studies on relationship breakdown consistently show that communication failure during high emotion is one of the top contributing factors to separation, estrangement, and chronic stress. We are not talking about a communication quirk. We are talking about something that shapes the entire quality of your life. And here is the part that nobody ever says out loud. Most communication advice is built for average emotional situations. It gives you scripts and tips and techniques for calm conversations. But it completely falls apart when the temperature rises. Because the techniques themselves require access to the prefrontal cortex that has already been taken offline. Real emotional intelligence is not about what you do when things are easy. It is about what happens in your nervous system before you ever open your mouth in a difficult moment. Let me tell you what the pattern looks like from the outside when someone has actually solved this. Because once you see it, you will recognize it immediately. There is a person in your life, maybe someone you know, maybe someone you have observed, who seems to move through conflict differently. Things that would completely unravel someone else seem to roll off them. They do not get louder when someone challenges them. They actually get quieter, more deliberate. And somehow the conversation resets. The other person calms down, something shifts in the room, and you watch it happen and think, how did they do that? They are not doing anything magical. They have learned to work with their nervous system instead of against it. They have built what researchers call emotional regulation skills, and the difference those skills make is staggering. People who develop strong emotional regulation in conflict report significantly higher relationship satisfaction, dramatically reduced anxiety after difficult conversations, and a consistent sense of feeling understood even in disagreement. Not just once in a while, consistently, because the skill is built into them, not performed over them. Now here is the piece that smart people especially resist, and I say this with complete respect because I understand the resistance. The solution is not more information. You can read every book on communication. You can memorize every framework. You can understand the neuroscience perfectly. And the next time someone says something that triggers you, none of it will be available in the moment you need it. Because the moment it matters, your brain is not in information retrieval mode. It is in survival mode. The real shift happens at the level of nervous system training, not intellectual understanding. And that is a completely different thing. What does that actually look like in practice? It means that when you feel that familiar heat start to rise in your chest, something different happens inside you before you react. There is a microsecond of space that was not there before. And in that microsecond you make a different choice. Not because you remember a technique. Because your nervous system has been retrained to respond differently. That space is everything. That space is the difference between saying something you regret and saying something that actually moves the conversation forward. That space is the difference between winning the argument and winning back the connection. And here is something worth sitting with for a moment. Think about the last 6 months of your life. Think about the conversations that went badly, the relationships that took a hit, the stress that followed you home, the things that were said that cannot be unsaid. Now imagine those same situations, but you had that space. You had that half second of regulation. You did not shut down. You did not blow up. You responded in a way that felt like the version of you that you actually want to be. What would those 6 months have looked like differently? People who make this shift describe it as one of the most significant changes of their entire lives. Not because every conversation becomes easy, but because they stop dreading the hard ones. Because they stop feeling like they lose themselves the moment something gets emotionally intense. Because the relationships that matter to them actually start to improve in ways they had stopped believing were possible. This is not about becoming someone who never gets upset. It is not about being perfectly calm at all times. It is about having the internal architecture to stay connected to yourself and to the person in front of you even when things get hard. That is a skill. It is learnable, and the return on developing it is not small. We are talking about less time recovering from painful conversations, less energy spent overthinking what happened, less damage to the relationships you depend on most, less of that hollow feeling of knowing you are smart and still somehow losing the moments that matter. The investment in developing this skill pays back in the quality of every single relationship in your life for the rest of your life. If you have made it this far, you already know this is something you need to work on, not because something is wrong with you. Because you are self-aware enough to recognize a pattern that most people spend their entire lives inside of without ever questioning it. That kind of awareness is rare, and it deserves more than just another video that gives you something to think about. There is a program linked in the description of this video. It goes far beyond information. It is built specifically for the kind of transformation we have been talking about today. The kind that happens at the level of the nervous system, not just the intellect. The kind that shows up in the actual moments when you need it, not just when you are watching a video feeling motivated. Most people will not take action on this today. Most people will close this video and drift back to the same patterns. Do not be most people. If you are ready for something to actually be different, the link is right below this video. Go there now before the moment passes and the clarity fades. The version of you that moves through difficult conversations with calm, with connection, and with real confidence is not far away. It is one decision from here.